The doctrine of discovery refers to 15th century decrees that were the entire basis for European expansion and explorers' claims over Aboriginal land. Under it, title to land lay with any Christian government whose subjects explored a territory whose inhabitants were not Christian. Simply, the Catholic Church's doctrine of discovery became the legal framework that supported the conquest, oppression, and destruction of indigenous people and the seizure of their homelands. Application of the doctrine of discovery continues. The spirit of entitlement has its contemporary expression in the exploitation of indigenous peoples and their lands by Canadian mining, oil, and gas corporations. Barrick Gold Corporation, Goldcorp, Northern Gateway Pipeline, Trans-Canada Keystone XL Pipeline, Pacific Trails Pipeline, Trans-Canada Saddle West Natural Gas Project, Wood Fiber in Pacific Northwest, Plan Nord in Quebec, Ring of Fire Chromite Mine in Northern Ontario, Site C Dam in British Columbia, Enbridge's Line 3 Replacement Program, Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline, Mackenzie Valley Pipeline Project, and most recently, the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The traditional Indian way may seem to be irrelevant to us, but if a farmer who relies on an aquifer sees it drying up because of an industry down the road is draining it, the sustainable Indian way starts to make sense. To Indigenous peoples, land rights and human rights have always been synonymous. But this relationship is unacknowledged in mainstream thinking. 3/4 of the world's mining and exploration companies are located in Canada, headquartered in Canada. It is an industry that has impacted hundreds of First Nations communities. Understanding our history and how it continues to play out in today's world means acknowledging and facing a particular tension, the tension that exists between two seemingly incompatible objectives: economic development on the one hand, and the protection of human rights on the other. Gains for the former have meant losses for the latter. And attempts to connect these two issues with any kind of intelligent analysis produces a kind of cognitive dissonance that no politician has been able to resolve. Many mainstream people get this. No doubt there are many sitting here who get this. Here is a quote from Gary Snyder. He's a mainstream poet. How could we be were it not for the land on our planet? It has provided our very shape. Two conditions, gravity and a livable temperature range between freezing and boiling, have given us fluids and flesh. The trees we climb and the ground we walk on have given us 5 fingers and toes. The place from the root plat, from broad, spreading, flat, gave us far-seeing eyes. The streams and breezes gave us versatile tongues and whirly ears. The land gave us a stride, the lake a dive. The amazement gave us our type of mind. We should be thankful for that. Okay. Getting there. Sorry about this. You know, at my age, you forget, so you have to write things down. In this world of deep connections to the elements, language and land are continuous. Indigenous people have always known that the land informs and even creates the language of its inhabitants. A bend in the river, the surface of a lake at dawn, the name of a partridge in winter. The list of examples is endless. The detailed, complex, and beautiful linguistic structures of Aboriginal languages have always come directly from the natural world. In our literacy, we are quick to think of a river or a herd of caribou or the wind itself as separate entities or resources that exist outside of us. Whereas at the deepest level, a relationship to knowledge, to land, can be a dialogue, and a participation in that dialogue can involve deep knowledge that goes beyond the meaning of the words we use. I am now one of those many who feel a sense of disconnection between our modern existence and the underlying processes that support our lives. How many of us have any real understanding of where our food comes from, or how the objects in our pockets were dug out of the earth and transformed into useful material? Externally, the various groups of Indians in Canada are different. I have worked on 31 reserves, which is only 5% of the total, so I don't claim to be an expert. But what I have learned from my experiences is that these people are guided by common archetypes and highly developed elements of their collective unconscious. The most common being a sense of being seamlessly integrated, not only with the earth, but with all of the life forms that inhabit it. Nature to them is not something to travel to in a car with a picnic lunch. James B. Elder once told me that he didn't understand the meaning of the word park. He found it confusing. I told him a park was a public area, sometimes surrounded by fencing, that was protected from development and was used for camping, canoeing, swimming, and hiking. He smiled and asked, "What do you do with all the rest?" I think he was teasing me. He had never been to a city, but he had seen television. He was not uninformed. I suspect he thought that nature isn't something to get by returning to the land from time to time, expecting to be made whole. For him, it was a life support system. The last thing he said to me was, "You see value in a tree when it's lying down. I see value in a tree when it's standing up." How much time do I have? Okay. All right. I just wanted to mention something, I guess, a bit personally. Well, it's a bit of a joke in a way, too. One of the elders I met, because they were my favorite people up north, he said to me one day, "So you Europeans were looking for India, is that right?" I said, "Yeah, I guess we were looking for India." He said, "So when you got here and you saw us, you called us Indians." I said, "Yeah, I guess that's right." He said, "I'm sure glad you weren't looking for Turkey." So I think one of the issues is that there is a spiritual energy in land that some people will experience. I think Guelph gardeners experience when they plant their tomatoes and their basil. When you see the convergence of the elements and the earth giving back, it's a very special relationship that we have. Now, we have about 600,000 square kilometers of land that is devoted to parks. We have only 28,000 square kilometers of land devoted to First Nations communities. When people talk about what do we do with the issues, we talk a lot about money and politics. But my experience is that there's enough land to return to these people so that they can develop their own economies, provide their own food, develop their own sense of self-esteem and respect that they used to have before we arrived. So, miigwech, thank you very much.